te rog. De fapt, primesc mesajul aici. This meeting is being recorded.
Yes.
Excellent. Perfect.
Yep.
Mulțumesc. Succes.
Mulțumesc. Hello, everybody. I am Sorina Dumitru. I am a PhD architect from the Ion Micu University of Architecture and Urban Planning in Romania. And today I would like to talk about architect Peter Zumthor, today's birthday boy. Uh, Let me just share my screen. All right. All right. So Peter Zumthor is a Swiss architect that was born on April 26, 1943, in Basel, Switzerland. He mostly spent his time in the mountains, and you will see what effect this had on his architecture. Now, this gentleman is 83 years old and has started his professional activity at the age of 33 because at first he was being the son of a carpenter, a cabinet maker. He also was a cabinet maker until he decided to study architecture at first in Switzerland, and then he must have done something right because eventually he landed to study design in Pratt University. And I have a feeling that his design approach was mostly influenced by his education at the Pratt University more than anything else, because you'll see that it's outside the box. So, a very interesting thing about Peter Zumthor is that he is probably the most loved architect of architects. We just love his designs, we just love his methodology. But every time I speak about Peter Zumthor to my non-architect friends, they go like, "Well, who's that? I don't know who he is. Why is this guy so special?" And I say, what a great architect he is. He's so unique. He has his own style. And then they start and Google. And I will show what people see when they first Google Peter Zumthor. They see a building like this. So you could imagine that they would say, wow, this is it. Like, what did he do? Did he do this wall as well? Like, no, he just did this wood structure. Oh, okay. Interesting. Moving on. The second most popular image.
Sorina, I am sorry. I don't see any image.
What, really? I am
I only see Peter Zumthor, April born 26, but you mentioned a building, but there is no
Yes,
building.
yes. I am presenting right now. I don't know, my screen is okay. Does everybody else see?
I can't see it either.
You can see it. Okay, so then it's Mr. Coma's.
No,
Then it's
no, I
something
can't.
wrong with me. It's okay.
I
In case
can't
the
see it.
others see it, is fine.
I don't see
Okay,
it.
thank you. Thank you, Edward. All right. This image that we have now is basically of a stone box, which is the second most popular image related to a Google search on Peter Zumthor. And a non-architect would ask, what is this? And
I'm sorry again. Sorry, Sorina. Edward cannot see the image either.
oh, that's what
So,
he said. He cannot. Edward?
right.
Yes. Oh, okay. I will stop sharing and I will start sharing again. I don't know why.
Very strange that someone else saw it, but not me and Edward.
All right. Then I have a solution for this. Let's see the whole screen, entire screen. All right. Do you see now?
Yes.
All right. What about if I put the full screen mode?
Edward, do you see it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, now seems to be fine, Sorina. Thank you.
Just let me know, interrupt me every time there's a technical difficulty.
Yeah, now it's fine. Thank you.
So, like I said, if anybody would search Peter Zumthor on Google, they would find this as the first image of a building that he designed. And a non-architect would look at it and would say that it's not really representative of anything. It's just a wooden structure. And moving on would be a stone box. And a non-architect would ask an architect, so what is this? Is this like a silo or something? Like, no, this is a church. It's very cool. And our non-architects would be unimpressed again. But when they look at this picture, this starts to resemble something. This starts to resemble a iconic piece of architecture, which is more and more being seen in not only on the internet, but also on social media, on travel accounts. More importantly, this area. And now Peter Zumthor is becoming a little more interesting to everybody, not just to architects. So what's so special about this guy? Is something that I was asked many times when I was bringing it up. When you look at the history of Peter Zumthor's work, you notice, first of all, that he doesn't even have his own website. He has a sort of fan website in which a lovely Norwegian architecture student decided to make a compilation of all of his most relevant work. And it is this guy that found this his very first piece of architecture, a home that he designed at the age of 33 when he just graduated from Pratt University. It's this home which seems kind of unassuming. It's very close to his house, which probably means that these people were friends with his family. Moving on. The second building of this archive that the Norwegian student created is another home, which is also kind of close to where Zumthor's family lives in the Alps. And this starts looking like something. This starts looking a little bit like some intentional piece of architecture. It is a U-shaped house. It has a portico typology, and it has this unusual type of roof that makes this whole building kind of monolithic, but at the same time, it is at human scale. A more recent one, now it's beginning to look a little bit like a specific Zumthor for the architects, is this apparently simple and modest shed set against the background of these beautiful Alps here. But it's an unusual shed because why on earth would a shed need this type of long window? When we look at it from another angle, it becomes more interesting because you realize that yes, indeed, it is a shed and the wood kind of looks distressed, but it has a different proportion than sheds would normally have, especially in the Alps. Is it enclosed like this? Does it have hay inside? It's actually a lovely piece of architecture and a demonstration of the fact that buildings themselves are not standalone. The architecture is actually the whole ensemble between a building and the natural environment around it. The architecture is a result of the juxtaposition of the two. The shed closes to the street and opens to its own yard. The studio also acts like a barrier between the rest of the village and the yard that the studio has, which becomes like a secluded playground, a place where they can be creative, where they can be amongst themselves, where they can be playful, like an outdoor enclosure, a safe space for the studio. And now we're getting to the bottom of what architecture really should be. All right, so I keep mentioning these Alps, these important Alps. Yes, Peter Zumthor was born in Basel, but he spent a lot of his time in the Alps, especially in the Eastern Alps, but we'll see that later. This is where he did most of his work as well. And you kind of tend to wonder if he's such a big architect, how come all of these homes are in Switzerland? We will see, because you got to remember architecture is not just the building itself, but it's the juxtaposition between the built environment and the natural setting as well. So, We noticed from this area that it's more of the eastern part of Switzerland. The eastern part of Switzerland is a very interesting part of Switzerland because it's right on the brink of the two halves of the Alps. We have the Eastern Alps and the Western Alps. They are two distinct parts, even if they look like it's continuously long sheer of mountains, because the eastern part has a different type of rock than the western part. So when you think of the eastern part, you think of the Austrian Alps, which are kind of more leaner and with a lot of trees and stuff. And the western Alps are very jagged because the rock is a lot more dense. We're looking at granite, we're looking at quartzite. It's a lot more dense, it's a lot more difficult to dig in. And right at the brink of these two is a place where a lot of interesting natural phenomena happen. First of all, this is the type of rock that we see in the Western Alps. You can see the jaggedness, you can see the granite in it, you can see all the drama. And so naturally, the types of buildings, the traditional, many centuries old types of buildings that we see here are these types of sheds because it's very difficult to dig in there. You already have some existing material there. It's a very much secluded space. So there's a tradition between building environments, building technology, building materials, and the consequence that is the traditional architecture of these houses. Zumthor, however, manages to find sort of a workaround. So you see that there is this co-presence between the traditional and contemporary building technology. So we have the traditional home here and something that also looks traditional, but is kind of unusual to be dug up in the ground. This does two things. This architecture gesture does two things. The first one that it does is that it makes the home even more part of the environment itself. Like, you cannot think of a Swiss mountain landscape without thinking about those traditional cabins. At the same time, the cabins are there to have this amazing vantage point. And so when you dig the home itself in the mountain, it becomes more than ever part of the landscape itself. It used to be part of the landscape itself, but now we understand the relationship between the built environment and the natural setting. And so we really lean into it and produce this unique type of cabin, which is Zumthor, all in all. Just look at this. You could see the juxtaposition between the old and the new, using the old material, but at the same time, you understand that behind this facade, there is proper building technology there, and it does not pollute the environment. It only works together, bringing tradition to the present moment. Now, Zumthor himself, I mentioned that he used to be a cabinet maker just like his father. So naturally, when he made the transition to architecture, it was very important to him to keep working with his hands. I read from one of his books, I forget which one it was, he mentioned the importance of all architects to work directly with the material in order for them to understand the physics behind the material and to understand its limitations. And it's not only the physics regarding breakage point, but it's about the temperature that you feel when you touch it, the resistance, how harsh it is. All of these physical properties work together to create this final piece of architecture that you have. And you cannot, as an architect, skip this step. You have to be very into the materials themselves. This model making does two things. Like at first, you are very familiarized with the materials themselves and with the breakage points, with all the physicality behind it. But at the same time, when you're building in these types of landscapes, I still feel it's not enough to just do a 3D model on your computer and just do some section drawings and everything. I think you actually need to understand what happens both to the environment and to the house when they work together. And you can achieve this only through physical model studies. Now, this is a model from an exhibition that Peter Zumthor had during a architecture biennale, in which he just showed the best working models that they had in the studio. And so everybody was kind of able to understand not only the buildings themselves and how they wedge themselves into the environment, but also the whole design methodology behind Studio Zumthor and how the models themselves have a tendency to work on several levels because they're not just made out of blue foam or something. They're made out of a material that kind of evokes the final character of the building. Some of them, of course, were built, others were just unbuilt and remained as projects, as unfinished projects or undone projects, but that doesn't take away the design methodology and the architectural quality that each of them had. And I still encourage all young architects and older architects as well to not give up on model building just because they have the computational tools to do so. It's something very different when the human scale is connected to the materiality of this. You understand things way better when you touch them. You cannot deny all of the senses. That's what I believe. Going back to this example, to Term Vals, I mentioned the materiality. So obviously, you can see that the whole building is the facade is made out of a rock called quartzite. So in the very small and secluded town of Vals, they have a mine here. And well, most importantly, because it's like right on the brink between the Western Alps and the Eastern Alps, I mentioned that some natural phenomenons occur there. So in this very, very small town, there are two very important natural factors that happen there. One of them is the fact that they mine quartzite there, which is a very beautiful material. It's this very, very dense stone that they have there. It's a metamorphic rock, if anybody's interested. And the second one is the fact that they have the thermal baths. They have some naturally occurring thermal springs there, which at one point in the 1950s determined one of the locals to build sort of a spa resort there. I would like to speak a little bit about the history of this building because this building was made in 1996, but this building, together with one behind of it, was made somewhere in the 1950s. So a local entrepreneur decided to take advantage of these natural resources that Vals had, and he built, I think he could accommodate up to 200 people in this spa. But the only issue is this was the 1950s and the 1960s. And I know there is the saying that if you build it, they will come. In reality, it was very difficult to get there. And it was even more difficult to let the rest of the world know that this existed. So naturally, with the passage of time, they didn't have enough clients, enough visitors to keep that thing up and running. So as you would have it, around 20 or 30 years later, this site, these buildings, were in terrible state, were absolutely terrible. And the locals there had to make a decision. They said, well, we got to do something about this. This is absolutely destroying any option of tourism that we have here. And the Swiss people have a tendency to be very pragmatic, do good finance, and also provide legal and financial framework to do some things for the community. And so the local community decided to buy out the guy. So this eventually, in an absolutely terrible state, got to be the joint property of the local community of the small village of Vals. And at one point they had to decide something. They said, what are we going to do with the springs? How are we going to get the people to be here? How are we going to keep this thing afloat? And that was the moment when they decided to hire a local architect in the name of Peter Zumthor, who was fairly young at the time and who didn't have that much experience, that much commercial experience, to devise sort of a space that would act as an icon, as a landmark, but at the same time would not cost too much because they were under a budget. And so that's why this building is made out of local material. I know that nowadays this is a very precious and very expensive material, but at the time it was the most cost-effective material that would also participate in this building becoming a landmark for Vals. The juxtaposition between the two is also very interesting because it reflects the fact that the space itself is not supposed to be an icon, but the experience of the baths is supposed to be the landmark itself. And these were left untouched. And underneath here, they just continue to make all the infrastructure necessary for hospitality. I'd like to speak a bit about the design methodology around this, which is kind of unique to Peter Zumthor. So, because it's more about the spaces and more about the experiences and less about the built object itself, then the design itself happens somehow in a bottom-up way. So, he knew he needed spaces that were sort of intimate spaces in which people could feel safe and comfortable being almost naked in these baths. At the same time, there are different ways of taking advantage of these springs because there are different temperatures and there are different compositions. Some of them have a lot of sulfur, others have different types of mineral. And so these different experiences had to be housed in different ways. And so that's why we have these section drawings, which are more about the spaces themselves and less about how the building should be. And naturally, because it's about the spaces and the flow, Zumthor kind of lent the idea of the spring itself. And that's how the negative spaces kind of grow out of one out of another, just the way a spring itself kind of disperses into more. And so the built spaces are a consequence of this flow of negative space. Now it's starting to look a little more like architecture. And now we can actually see some proper building, a proper designed build here. And in the section, we can understand the complexity. Like it seems so simple and it seems like such an unassuming building, but the level of complexity that we finally grasp after seeing the architectural drawings is absolutely unique. Like I mentioned, the entire idea behind this space was not necessarily, it's kind of a post-functional building because its major function is to provide the proper experience to somebody who was in a bathing suit and somebody who has to spend the most time possible here in order for them to benefit from the natural springs. So we see this hierarchy of spaces. We see these are the places, the changing rooms, and then behind here are like the saunas, and there's several types of saunas, and then you go even lower, and there's a different temperature for this pool, and then this is an area with Norwegian shower, like a ice bucket, and then you go back to an even warmer pool, and one of them has sulfur, another has magnesium. So the experience is more important than furniture or functionality in itself because it's supposed to be a leisure space. You can see even more how you go deeper and deeper into the intimacy of the space. And you can either spend time alone there or you can spend time in large groups there. And it's a beautiful thing how these types of events shaped the final object itself. The consequence of this type of design methodology is the fact that the building itself kind of melts away to the natural setting and to the whole event of the bath themselves. It's not supposed to be the main character. It's just supposed to be a background and a shelter and a filter, or like sort of like a glove that helps you take advantage of the natural setting without exposing yourself to the extreme conditions of a small alpine town. Why is it so difficult for us to cherish negative space? Like, why was it so difficult for me to explain to a non-architect why Peter Zumthor is such an amazing guy? I have a theory which I will explain. But first, I would like to show another example of Peter Zumthor. This is 2011 Serpentine Pavilion. So for those of you who don't know, the Serpentine Pavilion is a beautiful showcase of architecture. It's a temporary installation for which a major architect gets selected every year to design. And the thing about the whole idea behind these temporary pavilions is that they are very object oriented. So they have to look good in pictures. People kind of go there to see the object itself. Maybe they sometimes get into it, but like the whole thing is like is more like a huge sculpture and less like a piece of architecture. But when Zumthor was invited to do this, he created a negative space. This is called a hortus conclusus, which is a enclosed garden. It has references to the Bible. I'm not sure we should get into those, but let's just say that it is the physical manifestation of one person looking within, like a meditative state. And it's just unassuming. That's what it is. It's a garden, an enclosed garden. That's it. On the outside, it's still unassuming. It's giving nothing on the outside. It's just negative space, some pathways, because you have to have some sort of journey until you get into the hortus conclusus. But otherwise, there's really nothing to write home to. There's nothing to take pictures of. It's all about the experience and less about the object itself. And it's a lovely experience. I wouldn't say it's modest because it's so enriching, but it brings people together ultimately. And the slope usually occurs towards the outside, but this time it occurs towards the inside because this is also irrigation for the garden itself. And it also participates in the idea of an enclosed garden. Going back to the idea, why do we not cherish negative space and why are we so object oriented? I will give you my theory now. We've spent an entire century with object oriented views, and let me explain. Modernism in architecture meant the inhabitable machine, a machine in which you could live in. It was standardized, it was optimized, it was this box which was exactly what you needed and nothing more for you to live a good life, to think less about the luxury and everything and just have this functional thing and you just worry about you and that's it. Then the reaction to this kind of, some would say, austere modernism was postmodernism. I gave the example of the Guggenheim Bilbao because architecture critic Charles Jenks mentions the Guggenheim effect. So for those of you who don't know, the Guggenheim effect is a kind of a method of adding symbolism and of creating landmarks out of nothing. I don't really know the history of the town of Bilbao in Spain before this, but this certainly put it on the map. And if there's anything we can say about postmodern architecture is the fact that it's very image-based. You take pictures of it, everybody sees it, everybody recognizes it. It doesn't even matter how the architecture feels inside because it itself is a landmark and that's it. But then we have what is called metamodernism. Now, metamodernism is a term that first started in poetry as a style, and then a little bit in philosophy. And some would argue that Peter Zumthor's Serpentine Pavilion in 2011 is a perfect example of metamodernism. If modernism had one truth and it was right and everything else was wrong, tradition was wrong, then postmodernism kind of accepted the fact that there really is no truth and everything is up to debate, everything is under discussion, and that's okay. Metamodernism, on the other hand, is an oscillation between the two because it acknowledges that, yes, we need a little structure, but at the same time, it acknowledges that there is no black and white. So, if anything, it gives us honest lies. Now, a physical representation of an honest lie in the Serpentine Pavilion is the fact that this roof itself is basically inside out. So from a structural standpoint, you could totally tell that this is not a permanent structure and that it is to be dismantled because at one point this is not going to withstand all of the weight that like rainwater would have or eventually snow would have and stuff. This is an honest lie. Moving on, if modernism says that we have a higher meaning, we have this machine in which we live in because we ourselves need a higher meaning. Everything must be efficient and clean. Postmodernism kind of takes it in all as a joke and says that things are meaningless now. But metamodernism militates for we find meaning out of nothing. And that is a beautiful thing because we ourselves find the meaning. It's not given to us. And for sure, everything is not meaningless. We are the ones who are in charge of finding true higher meaning. Now I'm going to go back through all the examples that are like the highest ranking Google search results for Peter Zumthor. So we have this 1996 example of Den Vos, which actually kind of really was a breakthrough for what we could call metamodernist architecture, but ultimately Peter Zumthor's career. We acknowledge that we can make a landmark out of the land itself. The natural setting, the natural particularities of this environment are just, they themselves are the subject. And the architecture just is only like a podium for them, is only here to make you aware, even more aware of the beauty of the natural scape. For this box that we saw earlier, this actually is an example of the idea that your relationship to God is only your own. And that is a beautiful thing. You must, of course, shield yourself from the outside, but on the inside, it's only you and something that is higher than yourself. It's higher than a box. And to which I only add the beauty of this locally sourced material, which I think it's actually rammed earth because there are no stones here. It's locally sourced earth. And again, it's a beautiful relationship between nature and the object, the built object itself, and your own introspection. This unassuming this unassuming wooden structure, which wasn't even like, he didn't even make this wall, but he made this, is more than just the object itself. It's actually a manifesto of the fact that the natural setting itself should be under observation and not just museum artifacts. These are actually, like I said, sort of gloves that help you experience the space and vantage points without having to withstand the cold or the rain or the snow or the wind. Yes, indeed, the natural setting is correlated with some cultural artifacts, but you understand that the culture itself is a consequence not only of human activity, but also of the natural environment. And that is also on display next to the artifacts themselves. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I'm sorry for the little bug that we had at the beginning. I hope everybody got towards the end of it and saw all the images. I write a lot about these things. I write about the juxtaposition between architecture and economy or politics or natural setting or culture because I firmly believe that architecture is a consequence of all of these things and at the same time should house all of these things. So if you'd like to read more from me, you can just check out my website. I have a lot of articles there. And lastly, I would like to mention why I have such an intimate relationship with the Alps. I mentioned that I went on an expedition. So I went on an expedition from the east to the west because I was looking at different types of architecture in very secluded environments. And one of them were like bigger the German Hof. Others were the very small cabin. Then it was the Chamonix Chalet, which is very different because it's a lot bigger. And then, of course, there was this stone structure, Peter Zumthor of metamodernism. So I urge you next time when you go to a secluded environment, which is either really high in the mountains or deep into a Mediterranean or the Atlantic Ocean or somewhere, an island space, a secluded beach. I urge you to look at the architecture, but beyond the objects themselves and more about the events that they have to house and the experiences that occur within this realm of built environment and natural setting. And thank you, everybody, for the attention. If you guys have any questions or interventions, I am here. Hello.
Bravo, bravo, Sorina. Do you want to record whatever we talk, or?
I would love to.
Okay, okay, let's talk. I mean, you almost made me reconsider my relationship with Peter Zumthor because I made presentations on him and I was rather
Bored.
negative.
Oh,
Yeah, but we have subjective reactions sometimes, maybe more than it would be advisable.
oh, I would like to intervene on this because I have also, during my trip, I've read a lot about him and I had the opportunity to speak to some of the people of Vals. And yes, I can confirm that Mr. Zumthor is, you know, I wouldn't be friends with him necessarily.
I understand.
But I try to make a separation between, I guess, the artist and the art itself.
Right.
He was very petty. For example, when after the Ten Vase was completed in 1996, at one point, I don't know, like maybe 10 or 15 years later, another investor wanted to come and to buy out the local community there. And they said, all right, fine. We don't want to give it directly to you. Let's do an auction. And that guy won. And then Mr. Zumthor went in the press and said that he was wronged because he bid more, but they didn't choose him. And the community just said no. And also, you don't have the experience to manage this. And you just said, like, at that point, every time the press would ask him about the Tenvas, he would say it's a failed project. I doesn't want to hear anything about it. So I guess he's a sore loser. What do you?
But you presented him in a very different way than I perceived him, and that's why I'm happy that I attended your presentation. I think we can talk a lot about what the issues you pointed out, especially this meta architecture. Maybe we can talk a little bit about it because um, I myself not very familiar with this, and also about the honest lies. I like paradoxes very much, and this is a paradox or an oxymoron. How could a lie be honest? But let's talk a little bit about it. What do you think about I mean, this was your idea, Sorina, to connect metamodernism with the honest lies about this particular work, or you read about it, or
I read about it. So the thing is, the material around metamodernism is kind of it's pretty scattered. It's not like it didn't a unification hasn't happened yet between philosophy and architecture and poetry, like I said. So there are other scholars that mention that Peter Zumthor, it was my idea that Peter Zumthor's Serpentine Pavilion is metamodernist, is a perfect example of metamodernism in architecture. There is this metamodernist manifesto, which has, I think, 10 sort of commandments, in which they recognize that right now, with all the information that we have available, the past and the present sort of coexist, and we kind of decide how we mix and match them up. And so when I'm referring to an honest lie, which yes is my own intervention, I'm referring to this exact possibility to choose. Because even if we try to make a building look old, it's never going to be old. So we're kind of trying to sell this lie as with a little more honesty by bringing uh, contemporary technology inside of it, or by how he made this structure inside out, which is kind of weird. Like you wouldn't necessarily see that ever. So this is the honest lie that I'm referring to. I guess the meta modernist architecture is also paradoxical, just like this phrase. What do you think?
yes, it is very much so. Um, I notice myself in my own life that sometimes certain people lie when they tell the truth, and they tell the truth when they lie.
Yes.
I was confronted with not in a very a few times in my life I noticed this, and I'm not sure I understand actually how this is happening, but I think you explained better than I would have been able to explain. But this was my intuition that sometimes people tell the truth when they lie, and maybe the new president of the United States could fit in here somehow. Maybe he is some kind of a meta president. Uh,
Yes, I
I,
think
I,
so
don't,
too.
I don't quite understand him, uh, but you opened a field for questioning here that I find very interesting, and I wish there were more students here, or architects to start finally a debate, because I think you in fact I would encourage you to like other architects and other architectures, and to continue to make presentations. I would be very happy actually, because I think you are very good.
Thank you. I love doing the presentations. I have to mention that the first time I stumbled upon this notion of meta-modernist architecture was in 2015, and I was so fascinated of this idea that at the time I was in my final year, my sixth year. I was working on my master's. And I asked my professor at the time, hey, can I have a presentation with your younger students? So they were like 2 years younger than me. I wanted to expose them to this notion, and I wanted to see what they think about it. And the final question that I asked them, I said, all right, if a modernist building looks like this and a postmodern building looks like this, then what does a meta-modern building look like? And one girl raised her hand and she said, well, I think they don't have to look like anything because they're just a consequence. They don't have to look a certain way. They're just a result of a design process that happens. I thought I loved it. I loved it that she said that.
um, so besides, not that I want to sabotage the subject today, By the way, he's 82 years old today, Peter
Yes.
Zumthor. What other architects interest you, from the present, if there are any?
Well, I have to say that of the star architects, because I could call, so all of the recipients of the Pulitzer Prize, I think I could call star architects. I'm not that impressed anymore because I see these very interesting, very small practices. I see them on Instagram, and I think they do a lovely job in this correlation between the old and the new and the natural environment. So I don't even know what the studios are called because they're so small. I have them on my phone, but I will take some time and I will type them down into the chat because I think it's interesting. What about you? After you've had so many presentations and know so many things about the architects, what other?
Well, I'm beginning to be tired of myself, but while Sucker Punch Daily was still alive,
Yes,
uh, I spent some time to look at the works that they published. I don't know if you knew if you knew this website, the Sucker Punch Daily. They
I
used
know.
to show works by students from important architecture schools, and at the end, some plans and sections and models, the projects were presented, but there was also a discussion between the interviewer and the interviewed, the person who made the work. And there were several questions there: who influenced you, what works from literature or music or whatever influenced you, and who was on your radar. So I thought of creating, and I maybe your presentation and your personality and your eloquence makes me now want to do this event. I wanted to create some kind of an online festival called In the Radar or On the Radar, and I collected names of many young architecture practices from various countries that are quite interesting, rebellious architects. And I think it would be an interesting online festival to invite them to present their own work and to create a discussion, a conversation, since this word is fashionable these days, a conversation between the various groups, because indeed beyond the so-called stars that were awarded the Pritzker, which are becoming kind of boring, if you ask me, there must be practices that are valuable and interesting and inciting and provocative. And I think those works of the young ones. I mean, when I say young, maybe there are also some older architects who are unknown but do very valuable work. I think it's important to bring them to the fore and to talk about them and first acknowledge them, learn, witness them, see them, study them, and so on. So I will send you. I made even a poster, and I have a list with these many actually eccentric, in a way, architecture on the fringe. But I think, as somebody wrote, where did I read this recently? The revolution comes from the fringe. I mean,
Yes.
from the periphery, and there are forces at the periphery which must be acknowledged. Now, the risk is, of course, that the force at the periphery, at the fringe, approaches the center and modifies itself. And in the end, the revolution becomes conformism, and it becomes like what it tried to dethrone. But I think there is hope at the periphery, and I even invented a word. I mean, I don't know, maybe someone else thought of this word. I checked on the web, but I didn't find it. It's called perigard. Perigard, because we have avant-garde and we have arrière-garde, but Perigard is actually the avant-garde and the arrière-garde. They are part of the Perigard, because Perigard is that guard that is at the periphery, and the periphery is not just in front of us and behind us, but is also on the left and the right. So there is a circularity here that I would try to emphasize, and such a, maybe it's a linguistic exasperation, perigard, but not more than avant-garde or arrière-garde. It's just that it's more inclusive, because when you say perigard, it means something that is at the edge, it's on the fringe, but not necessarily in front of us or behind us. It could be in front of us or behind us, but it could also be on the left and the right. So
yes, I like it. I really like the term. I understand the etymology of it, and
it's from periphery and
yes.
and guard. And I'm thinking maybe we could create some kind of an event, a festival of perigard. The people who are not part of the center, they don't. They are not even so well known as the forces in the center, and not as well known as the avant-garde and the arrière guard, but they have a subversive quality, and I'm very interested in a subversive architecture, even though maybe architecture is not supposed to be subversive, but this is my nature. I like to sabotage the convictions of those who are too sure of themselves.
Me too.
So I think we can, I don't know, because I'm a little bit shy or timid, because we are recording this, but maybe it's my limit. I advocate democracy, and here I am being intimidated by the fact that this becomes recorded, and maybe the whole world will see it or hear it. But it's okay. I think spontaneity and even making mistakes, so to speak, maybe it's useful.
I think so too. I think making mistakes are human. And
yeah.
I think it's okay to not it's okay if other people don't agree with what you have to say. I think it's important that we hear more opinions than suppress them.
But returning to Peter Zumthor, I would
Yes.
ask you, I don't know if you know his latest work, or one of his latest and his most, the biggest, his museum in Los Angeles.
Oh, yes.
Do you know of it? Did you
Yes.
see? Personally, I was disappointed by that work, because unless it can be seen and it can be interpreted as a subversive gesture from Peter Zumthor, who is rather critical about Los Angeles and maybe even the North American culture, architectonic culture. I don't know what's going on here. I see. You want to search for a picture of it, no?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought this was irrelevant for the discussion.
No, it's good that you bring it up. I
Bring
saw a fragment of this building at the Venice Biennial a number of years ago. It was hidden behind clothes. Anyway, it was a strange setting. And I was disappointed then too, because I think it's possible that Peter Zumthor is not the architect of big buildings. I think he's probably better when he works with small scale buildings.
I think
This
so
one
too.
is almost like a corporate, a giant building, and it's
But at the same time, Mr. Coma,
yes,
if we keep this idea that Peter really knows how to make this proper juxtaposition between the object, the building object, and the natural setting and the historical context, then this is exactly Los Angeles, Like, what else is there? It's just, you could see it from afar. is just a flat nothing, you know? And maybe with these rounded circles and everything, with these rounded corners, it gives this extra uh, synthetic optimism to this building. There's no edge to it, no nothing. The same way Los Angeles is so overly optimistic up to the point of being
It's
synthetic.
up to the point of pessimism. Actually, you
Up to
know,
the point of pessimism, yes.
I will think about what you said, yes. And he initially, I mean, the model that he made was black. Now I see
Yeah.
it's whitish, it's whitish. But in the model, like you see here in the picture on the right,
Yes.
it was black. And I think he initially wanted to make it black. And maybe as a black building would have made even more sense somehow for Los Angeles, maybe. Um, I don't know. But one thing is to me, again, about Peter Zumthor is that he's considered some kind of a magician, a shaman, even a shaman, the Swiss shaman. You know, a spiritual dimension is attributed to him. But as I read and as I noticed myself, maybe very subjectively, my perception is that here is a man who likes publicity actually, although he lives in a village with 100 people, and who loves you know, paparazzis around him, and loves fame. And I remember when I presented him, I had some maliciously chosen pictures which you know, visualized what I'm saying. By the way of the pavilion, the black pavilion with which you illustrated the meta architecture, I think I understand what you say, but I was concerned more with the indifference of this building towards the park outside of it. Inside is I sympathize with it. I know he used the services of a good landscape architect or gardener. You know, they chose those flowers beautifully, and indeed it is an interior which encourages you to look towards the, although some people here at least are turning their back towards the beautiful plants in the center.
But because it's
But,
about the experience, they interact
pardon?
with each other. It's about the experience. They're not supposed to look at the plants. They're supposed to just be there. The plants are
Well, you know, okay. Well, some look at the plants, others don't look. I mean, this man on the left doesn't, because he is concerned with having a dialogue with that other person. But what I'm trying to say, the building turns its back towards the park. And this is more alarming to me, because nature is not just inside the courtyard, nature is also outside. And you see, there are beautiful trees. And I find it a little bit, I don't know, why would he turn the back of his building towards the beautiful nature around it? I mean, in what way is he honoring the beauty of nature in the park itself? Yes, there is beauty inside the courtyard, I agree, and I like what he did, but there is also beauty, natural beauty outside of the building, and I see the building in a very misanthropic way, turning its back towards this street. There's this, I find it like a contradiction, because if you are sensitive to nature, you should be sensitive to nature both inside your building and outside your building. So I find it like a provocative gesture towards the park. So it's possible. I mean, I'm thinking aloud now, and I say things that I should be more careful about saying. But it's possible that Zumthor does have a little bit of a schismatic nature. Not that he would be the only one. I have it too, and it's the age of bipolar disorders. I'm not going so far to say that he suffered a bipolar disorder, but even that house that he built, I mean, that you showed, where he kept a part of the old building, and then he added this one. Yes. Now here, you know, it is true that it's very, very difficult to connect, I think, with what we call tradition. But if we look at the windows of the old building, which probably was built without an architect, and then we look at the building that he built, the continuation, the extension of the existing structure that he built, those very narrow and horizontal windows are a little bit, I find them a little bit graphic, in as much as the shelves themselves. I mean, those shelves are not for books. It's obvious. They are rather deep, and they are not for plants either. But this is Switzerland. This is the mountain. There is snow. There is rain. I mean, I'm sure in the winter these are shelves for snow. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a functionalist, far from it. But I wonder what made him make these, because they are not structural. They are. I find them more rather graphic. Yes, they create the shadows on the facade, but somehow I feel that the old building is wiser and is more modest, because the old building doesn't have such mannerisms or such idiosyncrasies. To make shelves, I mean, those are about 20 centimeters wide. Why did he make them? Because it looks like almost like a library for books, but there are no books. Of course, it was the outside. So why did he make them? There must have been a reason. And if the reason was only, graphics or the aesthetics of the building, then I'm not entirely convinced. But I will think further about these issues. As I said, he was not one of my favorite architects. I know he is very admired in the University of Architecture in Bucharest, although people, admire him without studying him as you did, Sorina. And I think, as opposed to me, you have a quality in your presentations, and I will add an S, your presentations, because I hope you'll make others. You bring in the discussion or in the presentation some concrete elements, some factual elements, which I think add something to your presentation, while my presentations are rather airy. I'm a Libra man. I was born under the sign of Libra. I'm an air sign. So this is a deficiency. I'm criticizing myself now. I think we should continue to collaborate, and maybe even start, maybe we can engage an audience. I didn't advertise your presentation to people outside of Romania. Maybe I should have, but I didn't do this in a long time. But I could do it again, because I have lists of contacts outside of the country. There are quite many, and in fact, many of the people on the YouTube channel are from different countries, and there are almost 400,000 people. So I mean, visualizations, but even the subscriptions are 4,000 and something. So if we announce all those people, okay, I'll stop now. But I want to invite you maybe to cooperate with me to do the in the radar or on the radar festival, because I think it's worthy to bring together the most advanced ideas and the most recalcitrant even voices in architecture, young people who are pushing the boundaries, who are questioning, who are turning things upside down. And I think we'll do something useful. And maybe we could even do it because this year there are 5 years since I started to make presentations on YouTube, and I did it. I started on the 31st of May in the year 2000. So on the 31st of May, there are 5 years since I started this Zoom platform, and it was by the way of the birthday of Lebia Suits. And there were many people, there were 250 people, some left, others came, around 250 people attended, even Wolf Prix and Stephen Hall, because they were friends with Lebia Suits. They didn't spend a lot of time at the presentation, about 15 minutes, but they came. And then there was the assistant of Lebia Suits, an interesting Austrian architect, and he kept having an inciting dialogue with the students for about 4 hours. So maybe, like a kind of a, how to say, there are 5 years since we started these Zoom presentations. We can do something about the young architects of today in the radar or Perigard, or we'll find a name. What do you think?
Yes, I think that's a very good idea. Before you stop the recording, I would like to say thank you everybody for paying attention and tuning in, and please check out the other videos because they are also very valuable and very insightful.
Are you stopping now the recording?
Yeah, I have to stop it. I forgot. Okay, stop share. Because I promised stop.